Hey guys, it is Saturday, 9 a.m. I was very impressed with this great post by Jeffrey Tucker and Peter St. Ange, and it absolutely is worth watching. I posted about it in my last tweet, and it made me want to come and go back and give you a little bit of my sort of TLDR summary of the history of money printing over the last 100 years. So I put together this little slide show on Google Slides, and I think you will find it interesting. And so let's go and see if we can do it. Okay, so let's go back to here and talk about this thing. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about in 1914, at the beginning of the First World War, central banking has finally gotten in place worldwide. So the Bank of England was created in 1694, and people will say, well, the Dutch bank was maybe created before that, and the Swedish bank, but the big one was the Bank of England, right? So it was created right around 1700. And 100 years later, we have the Banque de France that was created under Napoleon in 1800. And the Russians kind of created their own state bank in 1860. And a little later, the Germans built this Reichsbank under Bismarck in 1876. And finally, in 1913, we have the Federal Reserve. So we have central banking has been, sort of in the cooker for a while, but now by 1914, we are finally ready. We have central banking worldwide in all the major countries worldwide in 1914. So now we have the ability for these nations to print money as much as they want and finance the Great War. And of course, they do that, right? And we start seeing money spending on a scale that we've never seen before. Okay, so we have this war. Basically, most of Europe gets obliterated, and at the end of the war, the French and the English decide that the Germans should pay for it all, and they should pay for it for the next 50 years. And you can look at these reparations; they're just absolutely insane kind of levels of reparations. Like you're basically you've been reduced to servitude for us for the next couple generations. You guys are just going to produce stuff for us. That was the general idea. Now the U.S. was involved in this too, because the U.S. had lent money to England and to France, and so even though the U.S. didn't have any debt really with Germany, it didn't have much. They had indirect debt by lending all this money to England. So they wanted to get paid too. And so we have this issue of these reparations. Well, at this point, we have the first sort of hard money strategic reserve. The Reichsbank, with its new technology of money printing, decides to print these marks and buy pounds and francs. Sounds familiar? I mean, they're talking about doing that now, right? Printing dollars and buying Bitcoin. So at first, this is very successful, as Jeffrey Tucker says. He says, and in 1920, there's this boom. This huge boom, and everybody's like, wow, we figured out the solution to all our problems. We're just going to print these marks, and then we're going to we're just going to pay off these reparations, and it's not going to cause any problems at all, right? Of course, it didn't take more than 3 years before the mark, the old Reichsmark, was completely worthless, and people would take wheelbarrows of them, throw the money out, and keep the wheelbarrows. That's kind of where it was, and so that kind of led to Hitler, right? That was sort of paved the way towards the end of kind of what was left of the German monarchy, and the way for Hitler forward. So. Meanwhile, just a few years later, the U.S. is in a complete depression, right? Now, this thing started off by sort of a garden variety stock market crash. I mean, it was a little bit more than a garden variety, but everybody at the time thought that they were going to get out of it. And I just finished reading this great biography of Andrew Mellon, who at the time was the Secretary of the Treasury under Hoover. And, he completely thought that, I mean, he was a brilliant man too. And he completely thought that this thing was, we're just overreacting. We've only gone back to where we were in 1928. We're going to recover. This is a big nothing burger, blah, blah, blah. He was completely wrong. But really what happened here was Europe, was selling US dollars to get gold, right? And so the response of the Fed was, we got to protect the dollar. So their response was they tightened interest rates to protect the dollar. And at the same time, they decided to impose tariffs on American industries. And so these were the main guys, Smoot Hawley tariffs. These guys were actually considered to be like the smartest guys in the room, and they came up with these tariffs. And Mellon, of course, was more or less in favor of these tariffs. And so the idea of protecting the dollar was viewed as smart. Raising interest rates was viewed as sensible. So this was the normal, sensible thing to do. And of course, it didn't work at all. And we got further into the Depression. And so, they voted Mellon and Hoover out. In 1933, Mellon's nemesis, FDR, took over and, started spending on the Hoover Dam, TVA, all this stuff, and established the SEC with Joe Kennedy, who was at that time one of the richest guys in the country and one of the most dishonest guys in the country, a big bootlegger, right? He was running the SEC. So he was the first SEC president. So all this regulation was piled up. All these public works were started. And so GDP went up on theory, but not individual wealth. And so we entered the war. We built all these tanks. The entire economy was turned into a wartime economy, and that was the thing. Oh, I am going to have to stop. I need to take this. I will be right back to this thing. Thanks.